What is going on, guys? We are back playing some more Surviving with Mekanism version 10. And today, guys, we're going to be setting up the production of sulfuric acid. Now, I know what a lot of you guys are probably thinking, and no, we are not going to be using this to upgrade our ore processing setup. I'm more than content with our current ore processing setup. I really don't need it any better at the time, so we're going to save that for later. No, we're actually going to be using the sulfuric acid for a much larger project that I think is a lot cooler. Now, unfortunately, the sulfuric acid itself is not what we are going to be using. That is just going to be a component used to make other stuff that will eventually be used in our final project, and that is going to be setting up the Mekanism storage system. Now, I know what a lot of you are also probably thinking, which is Mekanism doesn't have a storage system, and if this were not version 10, you would be correct, unless you want to consider their bins a storage system, which I guess I kind of used to, but it's pretty outdated compared to most mods. But Mekanism has finally come into the 20th century when it comes to storage systems, thanks to version 10, and it is absolutely awesome. And a lot of you guys have been asking me to set it up, so I decided that we would do that. Unfortunately, or I guess kind of fortunately, depending on how you look at it, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to actually be able to set this up. And the reason being is we need nuclear waste. And so we need to set up a fission reactor. And not only do we have to set up the reactor, but we also need to have fissile fuel to put into the reactor to make it work. And so obviously it seems kind of counterintuitive to what we'd probably want to be doing, considering we really don't need any more power. Most of the episodes we've done so far have been on power generating setups. So ironically, when setting up this reactor, the byproduct, and it doesn't produce power in and of itself, but it produces steam, the byproduct is going to be what usually is the component people really care about. And the main component we care about is what's usually the annoying byproduct. So I think that's kind of funny. Eventually it will flip around once we get a couple episodes past that and use it for power generation. But we're going to get the nuclear waste from that. We need the fissile fuel, and to make the fissile fuel, sulfuric acid is needed. That's about the 50% to making fissile fuel. So I thought that that was a good point to work on in today's episode. And then after that, we'll turn the sulfuric acid into the fuel. After that, we'll make the reactor. And after that, we will make the storage system. So for those of you that have been asking for it, we're probably about 3 episodes away. I know that sounds outrageous, but honestly, you guys will understand once you see the setup today. It is super complicated, in my opinion, just to get sulfuric acid. It looks really cool, it's fun to do, but it's complicated nonetheless. And after that, there's even more steps to even just get the fuel. Then we need the reactor. So lengthy process, yet an awesome project. Now, for those of you that came because you just want sulfuric acid because you think it's a cool color and you want to look at it, unfortunately, you had to sit through me rambling a bit there, but we can now get into the crafting for what we're doing today. And there's actually a ton of machines that we need for this. I believe there's actually 7 different machines that we need. Some of them are duplicates, so I shouldn't say 7 different machines, but we need 7 machine blocks in total, not including all the different fluid and gas transportation and stuff like that. But we're going to be working with some we've already worked with and some that are new. So we've already worked with the electric pump, very simple, the electrolytic separator, also very simple, and the pressurized reaction chamber, which is not as simple, but we worked with it last episode. The new ones are the chemical infuser, the chemical oxidizer, and the rotary condensator. Obviously a super fun name to say. I always used to think I was mispronouncing it. I still think I am, but you know what? I don't think there's even a proper way to pronounce that because that pretty much looks like a fake word. I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying that, I mean, look at that. I actually think that is a fake word. Maybe I'm wrong. I've never heard that word used before. Condensator. I would say there's a 90% chance that's not a real word, but you know what? I'm not going to put it past the English dictionary to actually have something like that. So we're going to be crafting those today. Nothing crazy expensive, but a lot of machines nonetheless. And then additional things that we have are going to be basic universal cables, basic mechanical pipes, basic pressurized tubes, a basic chemical tank, and of course, we have the additional electric pump from last episode. We're going to be using 2 today, and I thought, what better time than to use the pump that we accidentally made last episode that I said I wanted to find a use for, so it wasn't a total waste. So we will grab out all this stuff, and I'm going to try and absolutely blast through this because I really don't want to spend even more time on crafting today. So we need to make 1 electric pump. We need to make 1 electrolytic separator. We need to make 1 pressurized reaction chamber. And now we are going to need to make 2 chemical infusers. So we will do that, and then we got to click it again because it's got the basic chemical tanks, which do not stack. We need 1 chemical oxidizer, and we are going to need 1 rotary condensator. Now, I said we only needed 1 pump. That's kind of a lie. We actually need 2, but we only needed to craft 1 because we had 1, again, from my mistake last episode. So 2 pumps. So here are all the machines that we need. I guess it was technically 8 machine blocks with some duplicates in here. And then we've got the chemical tank and the various tubes and pipes and all that good stuff. So we're going to be setting this up over here today because we're going to be going from left to right with producing the sulfuric acid. And then after that, we're going to produce the fissile fuel right over here. So we want to leave some room for that. And so the first thing that we're actually going to do is quickly bring the power all the way up here so that we can access it, because obviously everything that we are working with today is going to need to be powered. And I'm just going to make this look really nice while we're here. I know I said, of course, that we're trying to do this relatively quickly, considering if I really wanted to stall this out, this could be a nice, 40-minute video or so, because there is a ton of stuff that we're going to be going through, a lot of machines to set up, but we're just going to run the power all the way over here. Every machine's going to need it. We're going to have to sort of adjust it when we start setting this up. But one thing I want to note before we jump into this is attempted to be a very space efficient sort of setup, so that there's not a ton of piping going on and it looks nice. There are different ways to set this up in terms of usage of space, and I'm doing it so that we can pretty much have a wall of machines, because that's how I like looking at it. I spent a long time trying to come up with this, but if you guys see any ways to improve it, then feel free to let me know. So the first thing that we are going to start with is going to be one of the electric pumps, and that's going to go down right over here. This is where everything begins, and this is going to be giving us water for a lot of our machines, actually. So we'll put down a water bucket right there, and this will be good to go. So above that, we're actually not going to put a machine like we typically do because multiple machines are going to need water. So we are going to bring that water right over like this. And the first machine that needs it, of course, is going to be the electrolytic separator. Now, for this, we actually only care about the oxygen. So we're going to put this on dumping excess of the hydrogen. You could use the hydrogen for something else. I may eventually do that, but for the time being, I really don't care. We're actually going to get excess hydrogen production from another portion of today's setup too. So we'll be venting out a lot of excess hydrogen, so there may be a way for us to kind of collect that and use it for something else, possibly even the setup over here, which I believe actually uses the hydrogen. So eventually, if we're producing enough, we might be able to use it for that, but for the time being, I don't really think it matters that much. And now I guess I should actually probably backtrack through this so that you guys know what we're doing. But making the sulfuric acid requires water vapor and sulfur trioxide. Now the water vapor is really easy to get. That's the rotary condensator set in reverse mode to turn water into water vapor. That's going to be on the right side of our setup. That's going to be the last step we do. It's very simple, but setting up the production of the sulfur trioxide is actually the critical part. Now, to get this, we need oxygen, which is what we just were going to be creating using the electrolytic separator. So we actually have that now. We can see that we are producing it. We've got a surplus of oxygen in no time. That's really not the hard part. The hard part is making the sulfur dioxide. Now, to actually make this, we need the chemical oxidizer, and that's just going to be using sulfur dust to make sulfur dioxide. Producing the sulfur dust is going to require us to either use the pressurized reaction chamber or chemical injection chamber, and because we do not have an infinite supply of gunpowder and it's not readily available unless we have a mob spawner set up, we're going to be going with the pressurized reaction chamber, and that's going to allow us to use coal or charcoal to make it, and we are going to be using oxygen and water for that. So that's again where the pump and electrolytic separator are going to come in handy. Now, this is also where we get the additional production of hydrogen where we don't really need it. So that's the part that I mentioned earlier, but that is going to be the whole process. So the first part that we are going to be setting up is the production of the sulfur trioxide. And this is the first step. So I just thought I should go over that briefly so that you guys actually kind of know what we're getting at. But now we have the oxygen. And so we need to be putting in the oxygen and water into the pressurized reaction chamber. And so we are going to do that pretty much right next to this water right here. So we'll grab out the pressurized reaction chamber and we'll put this down right here. Now you can see that we don't even need to alter the input. The water goes right in, and there we go. And if we go out and grab a, where is it? Basic pressurized tube, we're going to throw that down right here. And you can see again, the oxygen also just goes right in. If we look at the side configurations and we look at gases, the output is on the right, but every other side is the input. It's the same with fluids being just all of them as inputs. So that's why the water went right in. And so everything works fine for this. So if we were to put some charcoal or coal or blocks of those in here, or even dust, we would actually start producing, if we gave it some power, we would start producing the sulfur dust. So if we take this then, and this is of course where the excess hydrogen comes from, I'm going to wait to go over us venting that out until the end, but if we were to use this then, it is going to go into the chemical oxidizer. This is a very simple setup. We just input the item and we're going to get out the side sulfur dioxide. So we're going to grab out the chemical oxidizer and we're going to want to throw that down right on top of this. So we'll put it down right here. And we're going to want to rotate it so that we have the proper inputs and outputs. And so one thing that you guys got really annoyed at me for in the last episode, and the episode before that, was that I didn't know the proper hotkey for altering the configurator. It's N, so haha, I figured it out. So we can rotate this, and we're just going to right click on it. And I believe that this should be the proper one. But if we want to check and want to see the items, we're going to see that the blue output is on that side. So we're good on that. And the bottom is a red input. And then if we also want to check on this to make sure, we can look, because we're going to be having a gas coming out of it, that we have the blue output for the gas on the side. So the input for the item matters on the red bottom, and then the output for the gas matters on the side. And the reason that you want to always check is just if you're rotating machines, this may not perfectly correspond, because that's assuming that you are properly able to orient yourself with where the front is. So if you're rotating machines around a lot, then you can't always assume that it's going to correspond to the face that you are currently staring at as the front. So just something to keep in mind when you're working with them. But this is now going to produce the sulfur, was it sulfur dioxide? Yeah, so this is going to produce the sulfur dioxide that we are going to need for this setup. And so now we need to take the sulfur dioxide and make it into the sulfur trioxide, which is going to be combining oxygen, which we already have, with the sulfur dioxide to make the sulfur trioxide. And that's going to happen in the chemical infuser. So we can put the chemical infuser down right over here. And something that's important for us to do is we want to make sure, because this is going to have an input on the left side of it for one of these gases, we do not want to have to deal with the fact that this, if we were to produce something right now, would make hydrogen. So we have multiple options. For this one, we can come in and say that we do not want a gas output on the right. So we can adjust that right now. Nothing outputs on the right, and we can actually say that we want a gas output on the front, which we'll get to later. But over here, we can also, that's interesting that just filled up with oxygen. Did it just, for a second, dump oxygen from this in there? That is very strange. I actually have no idea why that happened. That is very odd. Okay, well, for some reason, we now have oxygen in there, which I don't really understand, but it clearly came from the pressurized reaction chamber. Either way, we are going to be inputting oxygen on the bottom here. So if we come over to the gases, this was set as the input 1 for the chemical infuser. It's totally fine. There's oxygen in there right now. We actually don't want that as anything. We want, that was items. But if we come down to gases, we don't want that as anything. We want that as an input on the bottom. And so we are going to be taking then the pressurized tube again and coming around the bottom here. And now this should be pumping oxygen in here. Honestly, if someone can tell me why that happened, I didn't think that we ever flicked this to a portion that would be having this output something to this. So that's very strange. But Regardless, we now have the oxygen in here. And if we look, we can see the color for the other side, which is going to be the other gas, the sulfur dioxide, is going to be this kind of gross brownish orange color. So if we come to the side configuration, it's gases again. And you can see currently that's set to be input on the right. Well, we're not going to have it do that. We're going to have that come in on the top. And so up here, we've got it outputting. If we look at the gases, we've got it outputting on the right side, which means all we got to do is slap this pressurized tube down right here, and this should transfer the sulfur dioxide into the chemical infuser on the correct side, and then this will produce the sulfur trioxide. So now we have that production all set up once we power these and throw the items in. The last thing that we need to do is put the sulfur trioxide into the final chemical infuser, and then we'll get to the water vapor portion, which is very easy. And so the easiest way to do this is to, misclicked there, is to throw down another chemical infuser, which is what we use for this, directly adjacent to the chemical infuser we just used, and to set the side configuration, which should already be correct, so that we have the input 1, which is the red, which is the left side in this, which is what needs the sulfur trioxide to be on the left, and to verify that this, on the gas output, is going to be outputting the blue. So I guess actually we want to make sure that this is not on the front. So we'll get rid of the blue output on the front on this, and we will put the blue output on the right. So, sorry, I was thinking about the pressurized reaction chamber, which we did want the blue output to be on the front for the gases. So now we should have the final output of the sulfur trioxide from this chemical infuser coming as the input to this chemical infuser, which is going to be producing the sulfuric acid. So the last thing we need for this is the part that I said was the easiest, and that's going to be generating the water vapor. And so to get this, we are going to be using the rotary condensator. And so we'll put that down directly next to this right here. And we can set this to toggle the operation into reverse. Now, when you do this, it'll say at the bottom, if you have it initially, it'll be condensating. And then if you rotate it, it'll be decondensating. So you got to remember to click the toggle operation so that this arrow is pointing to the left, and at the bottom it says decondensating, because we want to convert water to water vapor, not the opposite of that. And so this is where the second pump is going to come in handy. So we are going to come down here, and I'm actually going to need to grab some water. So we're just going to throw the bucket in over here to get that. And we will put down the second pump. Now this is a portion where you could still pump the water over if you wanted to make this a little bit more convoluted or set it up differently, but I don't really see the harm in putting a second pump right over here. And that is going to pump right in here. So when we supply it with power, it is going to be outputting our water vapor for us. And if we look at the gases, it is going to be outputting on the left anyway, which is exactly what we want. And that will be inputting into the chemical infuser, where if we look at gases, is inputting the second one, the orange, which is the right gas input on the correct side. So then if we come back here, all we got to do is throw down all the different power cables so that this actually functions. So we got to make sure that we've got power going to both of these machines right here, this machine, and this one. And so now you can see that the condensator is functioning. We are getting water vapor, which is being input into the chemical infuser. And over here, we've got oxygen properly going in here like we checked. We've got oxygen properly going in here with water also in there. And the last step is going to be for us to put some coal or charcoal dust, coal dust, or blocks of either of those into the pressurized reaction chamber, and that's going to kickstart everything in the entire system, and we will be outputting sulfuric acid right here, assuming we set everything up correctly. So in preparation for this, I did set our system to actually grab us some coal. We're going to stop this right now. There is a massive surplus. We really do not need this much, but we'll be using it eventually. So we're going to come over here, and we're going to manually throw in some coal. And we'll actually, now that we're throwing this in, deal with the last problem you'll run into. And it's not going to be apparent right out the gate. And that is because you're able to store, I believe, 10,000 millibuckets of hydrogen in this internal buffer before it is going to stop you from actually running the machine. But eventually it will. Your machine will stop running. And I'm noticing right now that we actually did not set the items to auto eject, so we need to make sure that's on. And we need to make sure that this item input is correct on the bottom. Huh. So the item input is correct on the bottom, which is the red. And this one is items are auto ejecting. Oh, this needs to be set to the output on the top. This was the one where I messed up the output on the right side. Correct. We accidentally set the output that should have been, yeah, there we go. Okay, so the hydrogen is going to eventually back up, stop the machine from running, and your entire process is going to stop. And so you need to vent this out somewhere. Unfortunately, unlike a lot of the other machines that can have gas backups, things like the electrolytic separator that allow the dumping of excess, we cannot do that here. It will stop it, and you are not going to be able to avoid that. So what we can do is make the basic chemical tank, because I don't think there's upgrades. If I could actually type in here without JEI doing something, I don't think there's upgrades yet to actually prevent that, the byproduct gas. There's gas upgrades, but those increase the efficiency of the machine. But the only way to get rid of this then is to either pipe it out or put it into a basic chemical tank, which is technically piping it out, and then vent the chemical tank, which you're capable of doing. So we're going to put the chemical tank down right in front, and if you click on this, once it's got hydrogen, we're going to put dumping excess. So it's actually going to fill up in there a little bit. We're not going to get rid of all the hydrogen, so if we decide we want to use it for something, we can a little bit. It's got a pretty big internal buffer, but eventually if this gets close to being full, it's going to dump it out. And unfortunately, so many of these machines have so many inputs to them that there really is not any better way to do this. I know it looks a little bit funky. Eventually, once we pull the hydrogen out of here, it'll look a little bit better. But we're using pretty much all the sides of this to pull stuff out. And so it's kind of a necessary evil. But you can see now that up here, we have the sulfur dust going in, and the sulfur dioxide is being pulled out. If we come down here, every time the sulfur dioxide is being input on here, the oxygen and that are combining to be sulfur trioxide, which is working there. If we come over here to the chemical infuser, you can see that we have water vapor coming in from the rotary condensator right over here. And you can see that we are producing sulfuric acid right here in the center using the sulfur trioxide and the water vapor. And so we are left with our final product from what I think is a really complicated way to actually get this. I know that it's actually being decently accurate and trying not to just simplify the process of making sulfuric acid, which is in and of itself in real life not super simple to do when you're coming from basic components. I think everyone takes for granted when they're working in chemistry class, if you've ever worked with any form of sulfuric acid, how, you might think it's very simple to get, but it's not. So this actually tries to very accurately portray the necessary steps to go through to get it, but it's very complicated for something that's only about 50% of the way to getting us to our fissile fuel. It's going to have to be combined with uranium in multiple different steps and processed a couple different times before we're actually left with the fuel. So like I said, that's going to be next episode, because this episode, it actually didn't take as long as I thought because we sped through it. Chances are you guys are probably going to end up pausing me talking because I talked really quick to try and get through it. But this is about 50% of the way to that. We'll do that next episode. And then after that, we'll do the reactor. And then after that, we will do the storage setup. So let me know if you guys are looking forward to that. I'm super excited. There's barely any information out on it. So I'd love to hit the ground running with that so that we can kind of figure it out and let you guys know how to actually use it, since I know a lot of you are excited for it and it seems awesome. But unfortunately, we got some work to do before then, so we'll probably be pumping out a couple more Mekanism videos with Create sprinkled in between. I know it's not always one-to-one with the videos, and some people aren't thrilled about that, but absolutely loving Mekanism right now, and I'm super hyped to try out some of the new stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Again, feel free to post in the comments if this was confusing and you need any help. And also feel free to pause or put me on like 0.25 speed so I sound like an actual human being during the video. But good luck with making your sulfuric acid. And I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Standing in a glass bowl at the end of a black hole, cold, lost and upside down. Faces swirling past me, all my memories rolling vastly.